Hi, everyone. Welcome to our latest edition of I Am Not a Robot. Luke?
Conversations on AI with real people.
Excellent. So today we've got a special guest, Lee Hickin. He's the Executive Director for the National AI Centre. So, Lee, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you both for having me on. Looking forward to it.
Cool. So we start the podcast by asking a pretty simple question, a quick 30-second LinkedIn style bio, why you're a knowledgeable person in this space, and then something to show us that you're not a robot.
Okay. Why am I a knowledgeable person? I don't know. Am I a knowledgeable person? I like to think that I am. I've spent about 33 years in the tech industry. I've IBM, Microsoft, Amazon. I've worked in Europe. I've worked in Australia. I've worked in Asia. That doesn't mean I know everything, but I've had enough time doing enough things to know what not to do, perhaps. So maybe the experience comes from making enough mistakes in your life that you kind of know what to look for in the future. And what tells you that I'm not a robot? Well, you can see where I am. There's a piano right here. Robots can't do that. Just
No.
there you go.
Not just yet. Yeah, I'm jealous. I haven't got a musical bone in my body. I say that when I sing, I can hit every note. I just can't hit them in any particular order.
So no singing later on.
Bit of a problem. All right, cool. The National AI Centre. What is it? What's your objective? What are you trying to achieve? With obviously a focus for small business for this podcast.
For sure. And look, likewise, the focus for the National AI Centre has always been, since its inception in 2021, on helping Australia's small business sector. So I think we share that kind of vision and focus. It was started in 2021. I'm relatively new to it. I joined the National AI Centre about a year and a half ago now. So it started as a place where Australia was trying to coalesce this idea of AI is happening. What are we going to do about it? From predominantly at early stages, from a safe and responsibility point of view, because at that point it was a lot of questions and a lot of unknowns. What we have seen and what I've tried to infuse into the National AI Centre's work is, how do we help more Australian businesses get past the hyperbole, past the noise, past the fear mongering, past the sort of the hyper ambition, into the reality of AI is just another tool, but it's an incredibly powerful tool that unlocks whole new areas of information and knowledge and capability. How do we use that in practical ways? So it's practical. It's about being practical, balanced, and, to your point, talking to small businesses, not talking to industry professors.
There was a big announcement last night from the Prime Minister about the Office of AI. How do you think that's going to change your role or not change it?
It would be remiss of me to try and speak ahead of the Prime Minister in any way. That's a lesson I've learned being in government. But look, the way I would talk to the audience is, what it demonstrates is two things. Is, first of all, that from an importance to the government, this is a real signal to everyone should understand that this is at the prime ministerial level, PMNC, as the Prime Minister, the Office of AI sits within his department. And that means it's a whole of government initiative, which means that it's no longer something that the small businesses should see as just happening in pockets around government. This means we're going to start thinking about AI across all of government. And that means in all the areas, across skilling, across education, across industry, where we sit. So we're seeing that positive, but of course, there's a lot of work to be done. And that's part of the work that we now take on as National AI Centre, is how do we make sure we keep our momentum and our work to help small businesses in that broader spectrum of this whole of government approach.
All right, cool.
I think with that in mind, and a good lead on for the last couple of questions there, or last couple of answers there, Lee, why should a busy SMB owner visit AI.gov.au?
Because I built it, and it's, why should they? So it's a great question, because that was one of when we thought about building this, and that was one of the things when I came into the NAIC, when I was enrolled at Microsoft before, and this opportunity came up to join the NAIC, the National AI Centre, we call it the NAIC. I'd had almost like a vision in my head that what we need is somewhere that concentrates all of the information in one place. My sense was, for small businesses, that the ones that really are excited and keen to do this, and I think a lot of small businesses in practical terms are interested and excited by the opportunity, but balance that with some of the fear and nervousness, but also with the time poorness that most small businesses have. Where do I go? And they find themselves going to a multitude of sites, whether they be the big vendors and their technology platforms that give them training courses, or they're going to other government sites to understand how some of the practicalities of it work. The intention of AI.gov.au was to say, here is your kind of one-stop shop that helps you understand the realities, the myths, the opportunities, the practices you need to do, and is a place where other small businesses can showcase what they do. So one of the really important things we wanted on AI.gov, and we've had this feedback from other small business owners, has been to see where another small business has done this and what they did, and how they got there and the steps they took to get there, that is far more valuable than any 170-page document you can give me on where AI is helping the economy. Those are important things, but actually it's the I want to be what I can see kind of piece. So that's why they should visit, because it will help them understand what AI means for other small businesses like them.
Yeah, and I think that's 100% correct. I think there's lots and lots of documentation, but small business owners, small, medium businesses don't have time to read through and wade through all that. But they also respond very positively to seeing other case studies and what other businesses are doing. So what's one of the biggest misconceptions you think Australian businesses have about AI that you're trying to rectify?
Oh, look, I don't think there's one in particular. I think if you had to bundle it all up, I would say the biggest misconception is that it's not for them. That it's either this sort of hyper geeky technical thing that's going on in the world and my kids are doing all about it at school and uni, but run a plumbing business, I don't need to do that. Or and that's often conflated with the fear of getting it wrong. In fact, I heard this the other day. It was interesting. It was a school kid being interviewed on TV about AI. I think it might have been on the back of the Prime Minister's announcement. And they made the comment that they said, look, it's really exciting, but if you get it wrong, it can be quite dangerous. And I said, and my mind was like, that's the core of the problem here. I think small businesses fear so much of damage caused by getting it wrong, whereas the reality is the damage you cause by getting it wrong is not damage unless if you know how to do it safely and have good practices. That learning and getting it wrong is actually the process of getting to the point where you really understand how to use it. You've got to use it to get past this fear of whether it's dangerous or not, because it's actually only dangerous in your mind as opposed to in practical terms.
So the avoidance approach. And we had a long conversation with a couple of other people on the podcast about just building your own confidence by just jumping in and doing it, but also have the fear of not doing it. Because if you don't do it, and there's other businesses, I know from our business point of view, there's smaller MSPs out there who are looking to use AI, so they could basically be equivalent of our size, but there's also bigger ones who are using it as well. So we could easily get squeezed out by those smaller and those bigger if we don't add it to our practice. That's very much.
You're right. It's such a sort of an extremes of viewpoint, the fear of not and the fear of doing, that there's somewhere in the middle is this sort of balanced view of the opportunity. And that's the other bit, I want to make sure we talk about is all of this conversation around the fear of not or the fear of doing never acknowledges the opportunity of doing.
Yes.
Why would you address any kind of risk? And every small business owner out there deals with risk every single day in either the purchases, the billing, the quoting, the jobs they take on, the staff they hire. These are all risks people make, risk decisions. And AI is also a risk decision, but there's a reward at the other end of every risk. That's the whole point of a risk, is it creates a reward. And I think that just gets left out of the narrative quite a lot.
And I think that's a key point, because I think there are certain risks businesses are used to experience, so therefore they can process it, where the AI risk reward narrative is something they're still trying to get their head around,
100%.
which is why the case studies help.
100%.
So we're in this loop back to AI.gov.au.
Yep.
Practical options, safe adoption, get in there, find a partner like Chill IT who can support you in practical sense across New South Wales.
Absolutely.
And then get started. So probably shifting gear then, like to the opportunity then, where are you seeing the fastest wins in AI right now?
It's a difficult, broad question to answer. Do you mean in terms of the use cases or the sectors that we are seeing that adoption take hold?
I think more in, and so I'm happy to have both, obviously, looking probably initially at what's a simple potential use case where an SMB is getting an actual outcome. And so it doesn't have to be, say, an industry-wide type solution, but it could just be a simple function that every SMB has, for instance, like a finance function or something like that. Yeah,
look, so if we boil it down to what is AI really, really good at? It's good at crafting words and thinking through a goal you set it. So that's the way we should think about AI. If you have a goal in mind, a purpose, and then you get AI to help you navigate your way to that, it's an accelerant to doing that. And so for small businesses, thinking about those goals, which are often, how do I get enough quotes out? How do I manage a marketing campaign? How do I make sure that my customer support is ensuring customers get all the right information? Or how do I make sure I don't miss a customer because they're calling a number or emailing an inbox and nobody's responding to them? And those are they're super simple. And it's not like AI is actually doing anything mind-blowingly complicated and artificially intelligent in some ways. It's just offloading process that you would have had to sit and spend time doing, that the AI, because the bounds of the problem are pretty simple. Here's a customer name, here's a quote, here's a job they're trying to do, and they're trying to find time in your diary. An AI system can easily manage all of those things and start responding to your customers on your behalf. When it gets into things like maybe your finances or your taxes or you're managing your ATO, I'm not saying no, I'm just saying that's an area of exercise some more caution because there's liabilities that suddenly creep into that. But I think the liabilities for a small business in helping service their client inbound requests is pretty low as compared to managing your tax affairs. Having said that, we have quite a lot of our businesses on AI.gov.au that are tax services that are using AI to make sure that they kind of deliver their capabilities. So it's often in the simple things, it's often in the time consuming things, and it's often where it's just about managing information flow as opposed to necessarily solving business problems. I'm not saying that AI is not good at that, but that's probably not where I'd start if I was a small business. Like I wouldn't be asking AI to tell me where my next expansion should be as a small business, but I might be getting it to take time away from me when I'm spending time in the evening invoicing customers to give me back the time to think about, well, what do I want to do next with my business? That's the human, I'm not a robot piece of it. That's where we're, because we can think of ideas, whereas AI is really good at solving problems in that sense.
Yeah, I think that's the key challenge is really, how do you still stay human-centered and do the work that that you're the business owner, the person setting the strategy. AI can give you generic stuff, and which can potentially be useful for research, but it don't give you the answer. But solving some of those day-to-day business challenges that soak up time, it can definitely help there.
I mean, look, the way I tend to think about it from myself and how I do it is because I think people often get caught up in the AI will do my job as opposed to AI will help me do my job piece. When I lean into AI in my job, it is because I want to learn something, understand a concept, or walk into a room or a meeting or my next day of work with a better understanding of what I'm going to face there. I don't defer AI off and say, just let AI go to the meeting. I mean, in our world, which is mostly meetings, which is different to small business, I don't get AI to do it, but I make sure when I turn up, I'm a little bit better than I would have been if I'd not used AI. So for me, it's it's my intelligence enhancer. And for small businesses, it should be their time and freedom enhancer. It should be by giving them back time.
And I think, as I'd say, for small to medium businesses, that sharpening the context of those interactions is important. So they might not be 1-2 hour meetings, but they are lots of little meetings, lots of sales calls or customer service calls, calls to suppliers, vendors. So all those things could be a little bit sharper and a little bit quicker, and cumulatively that adds quite a business. So why do you think some businesses get stuck on AI and some are moving quickly? Is there any factors that need to be addressed there to help get those unstuck and to take advantage of those who are moving quickly?
Yeah, I mean, look, take advantage of those moving quickly. Again, that sort of brings us back to learn by example, seeing where other people are doing it and hearing not from people like me, but from other small businesses that have traveled that road is key. But the two things that I see predominantly happen is people make the mistake of rushing into AI without necessarily knowing what problems they're going to try and solve with it, which is an age-old problem. A new technology comes along, we rush to adopt it. I must have some AI, but then what it actually does is become additive to their process because they continue to do what they've always done, but they've now gone, oh, I must try and do that in AI as well. And then they flip over to the next screen, do something, get an answer from AI that's either equally good or is okay or not, doesn't improve on what they had. And they just go back to doing it the way they did. And they haven't pivoted the use case. They haven't solved the problem. They've just added in a new process. So we see quite a lot of that. So part of the guidance we've tried to put on AI.gov.au is not just about here's the technology and here's the use case, but here's the implementation. Hey, here's actually how you get you, and if you're a small business, your team, thinking about making AI part of the workflow as opposed to a new idea that you're trying to experiment with on the side. Getting it into the system, and that's hard because you actually have to change behaviors, and not everybody likes to change behavior. And then the other problem we see is predominantly I can prove the use case, but I can't deploy the solution in scale. Yeah, the new kid in the stockroom has proven that we could use AI to track which stock's moving faster. And he's built this little app on his phone, but it's wonderful, but actually it doesn't work with Xero. It doesn't work with our tools. No one knows how to use it. And you spun up all that great idea and lost it because you didn't manage the process beyond a proof of concept. I think those are probably the most common inhibitors to adoption.
Yeah, the scale one's interesting because we had a guest who came on and they spoke very much about developers. So there's developers in large organizations and they seem to be losing their positions. But what that actually means is a whole lot of developers that are in the market, and with the bar's now been lowered. So small business can now look at hiring a developer because with the AI tools they have around software development, they can actually do things for your business and build those integrations and really hire an AI developer. If you've got to buy a new car, you've got to do a new office fit out, you've got to relocate your office, hire other staff, that's another operational cost.
Yeah.
But where before you needed a team of developers, now you can get away with having one who can work really productively in your business. So there's a real opportunity there to think differently.
That's a good lens on the way the sort of the job market can pivot and shift. And whilst we might perceivably think about job losses, what we're actually seeing is a distribution of skills and a capability for the market to broadly uplift, because businesses that didn't have capacity now do have access to that capacity. Yeah, that's a good point.
It's interesting. So the following question I might jump over, Justin, if you will, because just the point that you've ended on, Lee, here there goes into the next one after that, which was how does AI actually create jobs rather than reduce them? And so I think we're in a bit of a tangent there. What do you say there?
Look, this whole issue of AI and jobs is a really difficult one to talk about. And I say that from a place of, it is natural and normal for people to fear a technology that in some ways, at least on the surface and everything you read, implies it's getting smarter and better. And everything you read in the press will tell you that AI is going to remove these 100 jobs in the next 5 years. And there's nothing in their material to prove that, but it just is enough to set that fear zone. So I guess I want to acknowledge the fact that I'm not suggesting to people who are fearful of where AI might impact their career and their jobs or the careers of their children, but it's a genuine fear. My view is that AI is probably going to be very, very good at changing the way the nature of tasks are performed in all and every business. Anywhere where information flows, where knowledge is extracted or ideas are created and then executed, AI is going to have a role. But I think jobs continue to, and have always through all industrial revolution upsets, have always been tasks that humans perform. Jobs are jobs that humans perform. Tasks are the mechanisms by which they perform that job. And AI is going to be a complete change in the way some of those tasks get done. So my broad view is I'm not sure that we're going to see sort of the mass eradication of jobs. I think we're going to see the mass kind of change in the way that work is done. And that's very much in line with every other sort of industrial revolutionary change, whether digital or otherwise. But in terms of creating jobs, look, I think we're already seeing it. I don't have the data in front of me, which is a shame, but we should probably get into show notes. The data and evidence in the recent report from DEWA, the other government Department of Employment and Workplace Relations, indicates that, first of all, AI is not showing to have any material impact on jobs. But actually what we're seeing is a significant uptick in the number of jobs requiring AI skills. I think what we're going to see is you're going to go from being, and I'll use an obtuse example because then I can't be held accountable for it. Companies ask for plumbers, air conditioners, and sparkies now. And what they're going to maybe asking for in 10 years' time is an AI skilled sparky and an AI skilled plumber, because there's going to be some facet to that work that is enhanced because you've got this knowledge of, I know how to do plumbing, but I also know how to use AI to make plumbing a more efficient, effective. So I'd like to think we're actually going to see the sort of up leveling. The jobs remain, but the capability of doing them is enhanced by AI.
Yeah, I've got a mate who's a builder, and I was talking to him over breakfast the other morning, and what he was saying was that the big difference that he's seen with AI is that when people turn up and ask for something to be done to their house, rather than these vague descriptions or whatever else, they're using AI to basically say, this is what I want, and they're getting images of other houses in the area or wherever else, or off the internet, and they're actually able to give them a full image of what they're actually looking for. So he said it actually takes a lot of that debate around what are we going to use for the railings on the front porch or whatever it is, because they're able to demonstrate and show exactly what they want. And he said it just saves a lot of time in having to go through the whole scoping process, because it becomes much clearer much quickly. So that saves him quite a lot of time.
Now you reminded me of an example. And I was at an event a month or two ago, met with a gentleman who ran a small auto vehicle body shop repair. Cars come in, need repairs, dents and scratches, whatever. And he started using, or one of his staff started using AI to take photos of cars, of the dents, the damage to the vehicle, and use it to quickly assess the amount of work involved in the repair. Is this a simple pull out, or is this a complete repanel? And he started doing this, and he kind of got to, but he said to me, it was getting as good as his quotas. It was as good as the guys that walk around the car and do that finger in the air, or that's going to cost you about $1,000. It was getting as good as that. So he kind of stopped and went, I was a bit nervous because I felt like it was going to eat my business. And I said to him, but if you can do more quotes, the business isn't stopping. There's more people keep crashing cars. Did you think about the fact that maybe this was your opportunity to hire three more body shop workers who could actually now do the amount of work that you could bring through? And he went, I didn't look at it that way. But I think that's part of the problem is people immediately see the fear of it can do what I'm doing, therefore it's dangerous, I don't want it, versus look at what this opens up for me in my business now if I think a little bit differently about what AI does.
You'd often find that probably the best person, his best worker, his best foreman, his most experienced person is probably the one who's doing the quote. So you actually take them out of what they're best at.
Exactly right.
And so you keep them, so definitely an opportunity to do more work. And I think that's the mindset I think businesses need to take is, how can I do more with the people I've got? And how do I grow? That's the challenge I'm looking at as a CEO of a business is how do I use AI to scale up my business? We've got a great team of people. I want to keep every single one of them, but I actually want to add to the team. But to do that, I've got to get more business and I've got to scale up more revenue faster than I add cost. And that's what AI enables me to do.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's my business, but it's the same with every other business that's out there as well.
Yeah. And probably just adding on a consistent thing that comes through in the conversations Justin and I are having across the board there, Lee, is that quoting example for the body shop. Yep. There might be a process there that's enabling them to react faster and produce more quotes and get them done, reasonably accurately, but there is still a human in the loop. That forward hand or that lead hand or the owner of the business is still involved in the process of going, great, you did more work quickly for me, but I'm still checking it. I'm still marking the homework. I'm still validating. So there is this human in the loop that we talk about all the time. And I guess that's, we're not eradicating it. We're very much glass half full team here as well with AI and jobs there.
Me too. And I think that to my opening point, we can't ignore that genuine fear that people have that their job is at risk, because I think that however real it is, that's a perception that people have. And we need to address that. And we need to do that, not by telling you it's okay, but actually showing that AI you've got to kind of get your hands dirty, roll your sleeves up, start using it. And this, not to pivot the conversation, but when we get into this conversation around being AI capable and organizations being skilled, we talk a lot about you need to get skilled up. You need to kind of learn AI. People's minds pivot to, okay, I just need to go and learn how to use Claude or how to sign up to ChatGPT and use it. The skill isn't in using it. The skill is understanding how to push it to its limits and understand where its capabilities lie and what it can do for you. And I think until you break that barrier of getting into learning the technology, you can't really perceive what it means for you. You just see it as a tool that might take away from you. And that's where we're wrong.
So I'll probably have two comments in there. The first one, what I really love about that example you gave was that it actually took the experience and the knowledge and transferred it into a process that can be better, because it's actually the human knowledge and experience that you want to take advantage of. And clever business people, clever business owners, regardless of their industry, if they can work out how to do that, because at the end of the day, they're one person or two or three people who have that knowledge. So that actually enables them to scale up, because they're effectively scaling themselves, which means they can scale the business and they can employ more people. And if they're not doing that, then the reality is that their competitors exist in all industries. Someone else will be doing it. So they've got to be able to do that. The second thing I'd say would be about that experience. You've got to get up to the old experience curve, which people talk about in academics. But the reality is that once you've got some experience, you can then see the potential and you can see the opportunities. You can see what you can do with it. And if you're sitting back too fearful and not doing that, and it's simple, like if Microsoft 365, you've got Teams, you can use AI to do your meeting notes and your minutes, send your actions out. And what I find in that example is that I have lots of meetings as well, mostly client meetings, but it means you can actually get those actions out up front, turn them into tickets or emails or meetings. And so what would often be a case where they may never come out, or they may come out a day before the last meeting, so that you're not actually making the progress that you want to do. So you actually enables you to make the progress, because you can spend that 10 minutes after the meeting to get the notes out and actually action the actions so that that can be done. So that's a massive productivity saver.
Glad you said the productivity word in that sentence, because we're often held to this bar, we as in the government and National AI Centre, this uplifting productivity through the lens of AI. The sort of natural assumption is that people go, that means I use AI so that I can do more work. And I think that's partially true, but the reality is it's about more value of the time you spend doing work, and how are you generating more economic value for the business you own, the business you work for, through the time you have. And that isn't just by allowing AI to make you do 100 quotes in an hour instead of 50 quotes in an hour. It's the quality of those quotes and the quality of what you do that means you get more customers and you build a better, more sustainable business and you create this sort of value in what you do. I think that often gets a little bit lost in the narrative about productivity because it just immediately feels like that's just work harder and we'll make more money. And that's not a good answer for today for many people.
And the other part is that productivity gives you time back. So my reflection over the last 6 months, I've started to use Copilot in my business everywhere I can. So I use it probably 8 to 10, 12 times a day. And it's really sharpening up. And what it also means is that on a Saturday now, where I was working pretty much every Saturday, now I'm working less Saturdays and I'm doing less time on those Saturdays. So it's actually giving me time back I live in the Blue Mountains, to go into the city and, out to a nice restaurant or go see a show or whatever it is.
So the Dragons again. Do you, Justin, at all?
Yeah,
Free time?
Yeah. Well, that was always non-negotiable. I always made the Dragons.
You always make time for that. Yeah. Always make time for that.
I'm not quite sure that's a good thing for my mental health, particularly this year.
No, not this year. But look, the point you make that I think is worth highlighting is the reality that there's a learning curve and there's a time curve with AI.
Yeah.
I think there was a perception, because it was solved that way, that the minute you fire up ChatGPT and start asking it information about your business, you'll suddenly be solving problems and getting better. But as to your point, it takes time. You develop a capacity to know how to use the tool better. It gets better at responding to the kinds of questions you're asking because you've developed this capacity to understand each other's language. But you've got to spend that time. And, on day one, it's going to feel a bit clunky, probably, to use AI for most small businesses because it feels alien and different. But I reckon by day 60, it's naturally part of what you do. And it's doing exactly what Justin gets, which is that time back in your day and your Saturdays aren't spent working.
100%. Oh, I'm talking too much, Luke. You better ask a question.
Okay. I was going to say, do you want me to go on to the next one? So I guess probably an extension of where we've gone to with this last, bit about roles, etc. What type of roles do you expect that will change the most, and how should leaders respond to these challenges?
It's hard to gauge. I think in this AI world we live in, anyone who tries to predict anything beyond the next week is probably somewhat brave. So it's hard to predict that. I think it's interesting that what we have noticed, if you cast your mind back early days of AI and pre sort of our obsession with large language models, we were thinking about driverless cars and self-driving vehicles. And that was where all of the AI mindset was because of the Tesla kind of input. And I think we felt like a lot of those workers who work in logistics and vehicle and fleet and side of business were at risk. And then we pivoted. It's getting really smart. We're going to start seeing the need for lawyers and doctors. I think there was one point somebody said there'll be no need for radiologists in the next 10 years. I think it was like Dario Amodi or one of those people who said this. And I think actually where we found ourselves is the interesting snake eating its own tail, because the people probably most at risk, that's the wrong framing, but the people most impacted by AI right now are software developers, coders, and people in the sort of software engineering domain, because of course AI is so much more powerful than most humans are in coding and that side of things, which is interesting. I think we probably didn't anticipate the pivot from, forgive the phrasing, but from sort of blue collar impact to white collar impact, but it's become really, that's what it's led itself to. But I want to pick up on the point you said about leadership, because I think this to me, and it's as equally important in small businesses as it is in mid-size and large organizations, is one of the biggest deficits I feel we see out there in the Australian economy is a level of confidence and a level of permission being given in businesses for that organization to explore and experiment and find where AI has value to it. Most leaders are hearing the fear, and therefore the first step is let's determine what rules we have about not using AI in our business. That tends to be the predominant entry point. Yeah. Let's tell people what they can't do and sort of sets that fear. But leadership in any small business, and I've worked in a couple of small businesses in my life, worked for my dad when I was a young kid and he had a small business. People look to the leader, particularly if you're an owner leader, if you're the owner of the business. If you say to your team, I want us to do X, the business will do it. And if you say to the business, I'm a bit scared of X, the business will never touch it. So leadership really matters in all forms of business. What you say and what permission you give to your employees, to your team to use AI will determine whether or not your jobs, how your work is affected and what roles people will do in the future. I think that's key to me.
Yeah, we'll go to the next one again. What's one bad habit that businesses are picking up with AI? Could be two.
Well, there's probably, look, okay. So one thing that, and this is a little bit self-serving, so forgive me, but the opportunity to promote the fact that I think a lot of people are seeing when we say AI, most small businesses and most people who don't live in the world of technology, and as we have the privilege to do, see AI and they conflate all of these things. That's agents, that's ChatGPT, that's Claude, that's DeepSeek, and they have this mired knowledge view of Chinese models costing less, American models being foreign owned, data exfiltration, agents that can run all my business, open Claude that'll manage everything. They can't see the wood for the trees. And they come to this point of view that if you're being told to use AI, then the way to do that is go and sign up to ChatGPT or Claude. What I would argue back is two things. First of all, AI is often a product capability that has already been finessed into something you can use, and maybe you just use that. A good example you give is the Office 365 infusion of code into that. If you start to use AI to rapidly respond to emails, it's a simple little thing. You click the button that says, here's my automatic response, or please draft me a response to this email. You're using AI. You didn't have to learn anything. You didn't have to buy anything more than you already have. Then there's I'm going to use AI to learn, and I'm going to go and sit with a ChatGPT and use reasoning models and learn a bit more about what's going on in my industry, what the future perceives, what's happening around the world. And then I'm actually going to go and build something with AI. I'm actually going to change my product and build a new product that has AI built into it because I can see a new way that our customers want to engage with us. Those are three very different go-to-markets. They're all infused by different types of AI. And the only other point I would say is that most people forget that here in Australia, we actually have quite a lot of Australian AI companies building kinds of products like that for Australian customers. People like yourselves who are here to solve the problems for Australian customers. You guys help customers solve problems. There are Australian technology providers who are building products for Australia. The bad habit might be not just digging a little deeper than ChatGPT or Claude and recognizing there's a lot more here in this AI sphere than those two. They're great products and they are behemoths of the market, but they are not the only products out there when it comes to AI.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is actually understanding what your bottleneck problem is, and then how can you use AI to solve that? Yes. So a lot of businesses have capacity constraints, too many calls, too much admin, not enough staff. So how do you resolve that? Some people got cost leakage, downtime, waste, rework, fuel, shrinkage in terms of your inventory. They've got volatility in revenue, seasonality, demand swings, conversion rates. So they're all real business problems, and you can use AI to help you solve some of those. It could be customer satisfaction, but how do you use it to improve your customer service ratings in terms of the way you deal with your clients or the way you deal with your sales leads? So I guess the big bit of advice I always give is make sure you understand what your business problem is, because lots of people talk about you can use AI to create a picture of a Labrador playing cricket on the moon and it looks fantastic and it's great fun. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really mean anything. What's it do for your business? So
you make a good point. I want to add something to it. Absolutely solve a problem. That is number one. I think that's like, if you took AI out of this sentence, most small businesses would always look at anything they're about to do from the lens of, what does it help? How does it help me? I think we need to do the same with AI. The other thing that I think is important to note is learning how to engage with the AI. I don't know how you guys found your way to this, but I think a lot of people assume that you can ask AI a question and the answer you get is the answer you have, and that's it. That's what AI said, so I just kind of carry on. But now, of course, we're at a place where these AI systems are incredibly interrogatable, and you can really dive deep and you can push back and you can ask challenging questions. And I think that's where, as an individual, small business or sole trader or wherever you are, you actually have in your head a deep knowledge of your domain experience. If you're a Sparky, you understand the world of electronics far better than 99% of the population. So when you get an answer from AI, your knowledge is what will help you go, actually, that's wrong. The way you need to think about it is this. So given this new context I've given you, rethink your answer, please. And I think people tend to not use AI as a way to navigate through a problem. They just assume it's going to answer them. And that's all you get from it is the answer.
And to extend that a little further along, I gave a demonstration just yesterday of Copilot sitting inside Fabric for a data and analytics presentation. And it was to a non-technical user group. It was to a type function, and they were responsible for reporting. And I was showing how they highlighted, I'm not a reporting analyst, I'm not a business analyst. I know my business, exactly as you're saying here. And one of the problems that they had to learn primary keys and secondary keys and understand how databases were stitched together. She said she was most interested in seeing agents, data agents, and that sort of thing inside this tooling. Mm-hmm. We showed how that worked. And I said, well, this is functioning. Here's a little demonstration. And I said, the good thing is, at the bottom of this is, how did I come up with my answer? Click the button and it shows the logic it took to achieve the answer. And so there is this sense check of going, I'll tell you how I got that answer too, by the way. And then you go, cool. As the knowledge worker who understands the answer is able to go, yeah, cool, you did that the right way. And that's a really fascinating use case, I think, of exactly as you said, the knowledge worker, be it an electrician, be it a chief operating officer of a small business, is able to save some time, but then also mark the homework and make sure it is right, or sense check that it's the right.
It's what we hear people talk a lot about, is this sort of cognitive unload, and the fact that we just assume because it's AI and it's answered in a particular way that we don't have to think about what it said. We just accept the fact. And so, yes, the reasoning logic will give you some sense of understanding it. But the other thing as well is people have a deep-seated fear of this concept of hallucinations, that the fact that AI will either get it wrong, make something up, and you can't navigate around that. And of course, when you have that domain expertise and you see something from AI and you know it is wrong, but you can respond back and say, that is actually incorrect. Redo your thinking. That is not a piece of a working that you can use anymore. Don't attempt to do it that way. You can redirect. Hallucinations aren't the end of the road. They're a natural occurrence in large language models because of the nature, by the way, they plan the words. So you can work around it though. But again, it's just getting people to that point of recognizing that they can challenge the system. They can use it in an integrated way. It's not just a tool with an output and that's the end of the conversation. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and the reality is, if you've got a team of people, when you have conversations, there'll be people who make statements about things and they may not be factually correct, or they've misunderstood something they've researched. And that's part of the normal dialogue you have as a team and with people. And my wife likes to pull me up and say to the babies it's quite as correct as it should be. You just got to recognize that's what happens with humans. So there's no reason why you can't question the AI. So I think we're almost pretty much at the end. So I might just ask for one big picture vision from you in terms of where you think AI could transform the Australian economy over the next decade.
Well, it's more of an ambition than a think, because I don't know necessarily, I couldn't predict that we're going to get there. But as you would know, and your audience would very well know, small businesses are the predominant workforce of the Australian population, 90 something plus. I keep hearing varying numbers, but certainly in the high 90s, and represents a very significant amount of our economy as well. So in terms of the impact it will have to Australia, if we could get 20% of Australian small businesses to be using AI in ways that give them back either time or increase their productivity or increase the value of the services they offer to the market, and consequently the Australian market and maybe even the global market, depends on what your small business finds new customers and creates new streams of revenue. If we could just get 20% of that, the impact will be significant. It's significant in terms of our GDP, in terms of our domestic product as well. So I think, to me, it's my hope is, and the reason why I joined the National AI Centre and built AI.gov.au, is I want to take all of the hot air out of the room around AI and get down to sort of three very simple, basic things, which is I want to give every Australian the clarity about what AI really is for them. I want to give them the capability to find their way to that and learn how to use it on their terms, and ultimately build out of that the confidence that as a nation, AI is actually for us. It can be used by us, and it isn't just for the big business. AI is actually perhaps even more powerful in small businesses, because small businesses can put it to work in very small ways that actually add up to an accumulative high value for them.
Yeah, we've had a couple of speakers on the podcast who've spoken about, for example, regional Australia, and how that they often have a skills shortage and they've got tyranny of distance to deal with. So AI really can help with their productivity. From a global point of view, it allows us to compete against other countries. And we've got to take advantage of that and definitely leverage that. And in terms of innovation, the latest podcast we've just had out is from a lady who's got a startup in the Australian space industry as a small business. It allows us to innovate and be in those businesses and punch above our weight as well. So now we've got a long history of punching above our weight, and that's what we've got to use AI for.
100%.
All right.
And we're global leaders in a bunch of things. We have a great space industry. We have a great agri industry. We have a whole bunch of things that Australia is actually significant players in the world stage, and that's our opportunity in front of us.
Yes, 100%. All right. So that's pretty much it for the interview. Any last comments or things you want to cover that you haven't had a chance to get off your chest?
Did I mention we have a platform called AI.gov.au that all small businesses should be bookmarking and going to every day to learn about what AI means for them?
I think you may have. Anyway, it's good to remind them. And that's good. All right. So we'll close it off there. So thank you very much, Lee. That was a fantastic interview. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this latest episode of I'm Not a Robot. and we'll see you next time. Thank you.